Welcome, everyone. I'm going to give a few seconds for folks to enter the room, and then we'll get started. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to WeHo Reads, presented by the City of West Hollywood. As always, we're thankful for their support of the literary arts. I'm your host, Cody Cisco, executive editor and founder of Bookswell, the literary events and media company that is producing the WeHo Read series. Tonight, we are honored to have two esteemed Poets Laureate joining us for a conversation about poetry, community building, and the literary life. Welcome to California Poet Laureate Lee Herrick, and welcome back, West Hollywood Poet Laureate and community treasurer Cheng. I'll provide a more in-depth introduction for both of them in a moment. First, I'd like to welcome West Hollywood Arts Division Representative Mike Che for a few announcements. Mike, you are on.
Thank you, Cody. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us for WeHo Reads. We are so pleased to have you here today, and really especially thankful that Lee Herrick is joining us. Lee Herrick is the first Asian American poet laureate for the state of California, and it only took since we've been having poet laureates since 1915, so not that long. And very pleased, and Cheng is our first Asian American poet laureate for the city of West Hollywood. So obviously I'm Asian as well, and it is I was the one who helped usher in the poet laureate program for our city, which has been giving me so much life, so much value, and I'm so glad that we have this poet laureate program. April is National Poetry Month. You can see it in West Hollywood. If you drive down the street, Santa Monica Boulevard, we have banners all over the place with excerpts of poetry on them. We have tonight's event, and we had one workshop last weekend and another one coming up on Saturday from our inaugural poet laureate, Stephen Rains. And we also have a couple of other events that I want to draw your attention to. We do a really wonderful free 2-day LGBTQ Arts Festival that'll be taking place all day on May 23rd and 24th. Thank you, Cody. So 12 o'clock, 9 o'clock to 9 o'clock each day. It's all free to attend. You can see a few of our participants there. Jen will also be running a workshop on Saturday, and we also have the Pride Poets who will be doing interactive poetry for you. They'll hear your story and write you a poem right on the spot. And another program that I oversee is our Harvey Milk Day event, which is on May 22nd, the day before it. It's not literary, but it's just a lot of fun. If you like drag, we have a drag pageant. It's also free to attend, and we are honoring the contributions of our LGBTQ plus politicians. We always start our programs with a land acknowledgement, and the city of West Hollywood is located on the unceded seized territory of the Gabrielino Tongva and Gabrielino Teach peoples. Please take a moment to honor those who are the original caretakers of the lands where you are. And of course, we cannot do this without the continued support of our city council. They really do appreciate the arts, and so they fund it. Funding is a symbol of what you care about, and we are so glad that they continue to support this financially and allow us to bring this wonderful literary program to you. Without further ado, I'd like to bring on Cheng and Lee Herrick. Jen, why don't you come on? Do you want me to intro you, or would you like me to do it yourself?
I think they can read our official bios on the internet, and Cody can paste it on the chat box if you desire. And I would just like to get us started because it's wonderful to have this recorded and available for legacy and posterity, given that Lee Herrick is a trailblazer. And I've had the pleasure and honor of having a conversation with Lee in person a few years back, but we didn't get to have it recorded, so I'm happy for this alternate format. So more telling about April Poetry Month. Tell us what you're doing with your April Poetry Month celebrations.
Oh, my goodness. Well, before that, if I can just say really briefly how nice it is to see you, Jen, and happy National Poetry Month. And special thanks, Cody, Mike, WeHo Reads. This is really fantastic. So thank you for having me. Months, right? They're interesting. Of course, they're an opportunity to highlight whether it's a culture, a gender, a discipline, or an art. We probably think of poetry year round, but April is always a busy month for many poets. Um, I'm traveling quite a bit this month. I've got some great events. I imagine you're doing quite a bit there too. Um, yeah, a lot of events. I was just in Vacaville at a museum. I'll be reading in Pacific Grove Saturday and quite a few other events throughout the month. But it's been pretty good. How about you? Has yours been busy?
Yeah, we had a class in West Hollywood's library, which is gorgeous, and we have a lovely support of our librarians as well as the city and the Friends of the Library. So we had a reading about kinship and collective cultures, and had a writing class where students learned about form, and so they got to have a taste of three forms.
Mm,
So yeah, just being able to say, hey, meet me and we'll take a walk around West Hollywood and I'll show you the poetry banners that Mike has shepherded all these years, from the first Poet Laureate. And it's a collection that just keeps growing. And
mm,
it's always a delight to see them each month,
mm.
each year for the April month. And
Yeah.
so to have a visual representation that maybe people who are not poetry fans can see and be
Mhm.
introduced to poetry. I feel like poet laureate jobs include, bringing new people into poetry. So I hope we have
Mhm.
some new people listening tonight and checking out what Poetry Month means and
Mhm.
being arts ambassadors. So maybe poetry is integrated with other aspects like art or other kinds of creativity.
Yeah. You're so right. I mean, I think that one of the fortunate parts of laureateship is how many new audiences and how many new ways poetry can be seen and experienced. Sometimes it's when we're bringing it to a group or an audience, but in my experience, it's been just as common, if not more common, where I'm learning more about how poetry can be used wherever I'm visiting. Um, for example, I loved what you did in West Hollywood. I don't know if you're still doing that series. It's an outdoor, back sort of patio event. And did I see you did a poetry hotline?
Yes, so for the last 3 Decembers, when um, December tends to be difficult for mental health challenges. It's the month where depression and seasonal depression can take people. It's a way for people to connect on the phone, and for the whole entire month, I offer my phone line, a Google phone line, as an outgoing answering machine. Back when we used to have answering machines, and you can leave a poem on outgoing message, and each week there's a new poem that people can dial back and listen to it before me, and they share one of their poems with their lovely voice. And then there's a live hotline afternoon where people call in and get the custom co-created poems, or get a poem read to them, because sometimes we really just want to be read to or
Mm,
have someone to talk to. And we get everybody from young kids to older folks to heartbroken, unrequited love, or I need to celebrate my job, celebrate me, like self love. So
mhm,
we get all kinds of topic requests, and it's so much fun. And yeah, it's
mm,
a time when we're not already inundated with poetry. April Poetry Month is so much fun. and I can't gobble it all up. So I wanted to offer it in December when it's a little bit of a quieter time.
I love it. I mean, that's a great example of what poetry can do, different mediums or different modes for it. I was really moved by that when I read you were doing that. It reminds me of some other cities I've visited in Santa Barbara at a state park, actually, but it's a small, little, beautiful building. Inside, there's a poetry machine where you can get a poem printed out. Um, I remember this is not in California, but I visited the Nichols School, which is a boarding school in Buffalo, New York, and they installed the first poetry periscope, it's called, in the United States. They're throughout Europe in different cities, but Buffalo, New York has the first one where you press a button and an audio poem is read by the author. It's really neat. Um, Lake County, California, former poet laureate there in Lake County, had some really neat poetry displays and boxes throughout the city. Um, the more you're out there, it's probably like walking through the woods or on a beach. You just discover more and more. That's been my experience.
Well, I've had a neighbor tell me specifically her friend loves poetry and she just doesn't get it. And she doesn't like poetry. Like she was like, I'm sorry to say, I didn't know she was going to have this reaction, but and that was really exciting that I could share that poem with her. And she was like, I actually like your poem. I was like, that's the highest compliment for somebody who's like, I don't know why my friend takes out all these books from the library that are stacks of poetry. She was just like grumpy about it. I was like, okay, you don't have to like poetry. And there's something for everyone. I'm sure at some point she might have been delighted with some poem as a child.
Yeah.
So I was like, let me just change it up for this grumpy person. So if I can, may I read this poem, Recipe for Creativity, Blessed by Ghosts of the Greats. Crack open songs of paved paradise on sunset. Whisk in air of Grammy-winning music from the troubadour. Cut a sprig of rosemary smelling history on Harper Avenue. Rub in soil from gardens of Art Deco apartments. Soak in sun by the gates of Morrison's historic home. Sprout seeds from a neighbor's plant poolside. Sauce up corn dogs from the haunted sound studio next to Shake Shack. Chop up drafts and let brilliant bits simmer. Flip to the acknowledgments of bestsellers of Book Soup. Build layers of a team like they did to boost you. Roll with friends you meet at library workshops. Wrap yourself with robes and light candles, chant under full moons to call upon ghosts of the greats who wrote books, films, and songs to sprinkle glitter and persistence to never let go of dreams.
All right. Love it.
That's that's the poem I give to the grumpy. I don't know if I like poetry people.
That's good. I kind of have you going in and out. Oh, I kind of have you going in and out a bit, Jen, but
What's it like to read to people who may be a stranger? Oh no. I'm sorry. I don't know why that was happening.
oh, I hope I'm not speaking over you, but no, I loved the poem. I love the poem, and it's very recipe-like, take a little of this, try a little of that. It's a very LA poem too. It feels like, not that I'm an expert, but I heard, Morrison, I heard Book Soup, the great bookstore, of course, the Troubadour. So a lot of great flavor in there. Um, I feel like, oh, and by the way, I just love glitter and persistence.
Yes.
Beautiful. Yeah. and there are, like you said, at one point they probably loved a poem. Um, I think, you know, poetry, especially if we think of it as lyrics, it's our first, or many of our first forays into learning. I mean, when children learn the alphabet, it's in a song. Different nursery rhymes are musical and lyric and sometimes rhyming. Um, I think, like many other joys in this life, poetry can be either taken from us, obfuscated in some way, deemed insignificant or meaningless. Um, but people can return to it, and they often do. They might be in high school, they might be in their 70s, but I've
Yep.
seen it time and time again. And often, it's with a situation like that when you bring it to them. But I've also seen it where it's at a wedding, and someone hears a poem read with the magnitude of this occasion. Um, it's a powerful thing. I mean, I think there's a reason almost every state in the country has an official civic appointment for a poet, Not that we are, as I like to joke, not that I'm person of the month or, poets laureate or um, any more significant, but I do think the poetry is significant. So, yeah.
So, what kind of poem do you like to read for the skeptics out there?
Oh gosh.
Or maybe just a favorite poem of yours that celebrates California, because that poem
Yeah.
celebrated West Hollywood landmarks.
Oh, I could read that. Yeah. That's a poem that I wrote, I think it was about 2007. And speaking about Asian American West Hollywood Poet Laureate, I'm the first Asian American. Mike mentioned uh, his interests in Asian American literary and arts communities. In 2007, it was several decades after I had been adopted from Korea, and I was raised in California, but I was raised in a white family as an adoptee. So um, those two things really contributed to me often feeling like an outsider just by race, but also in my thinking. I grew up after some classic rock. I was listening to punk. I was listening to rap, um, not paying attention in school as much as I should have. My point is that in 2007, 2008, it was a big election year. This was when Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama were running for the Democratic nomination. And I just started thinking, I'm a Californian too. Visibility, erasure, representation, these kinds of themes run through our lives, whether we're aware of it or not. But this was sort of my attempts to say, I'm here too. Um, and it really just became a poem of things I had seen and things I've hoped for. So this is called My California. Here, an olive votive keeps the sunset lit. The Korean 20-somethings talk about hyphens, graduate school, and good pot. And a group of four at a window table in Carpinteria discuss the quality of wines in Napa Valley versus Lodi. Here in my California, the streets remember the Chicano poet whose songs still bank off Fresno's beer-soaked gutters and almond trees in partial blossom. Here in my California, we fish out long noodles from the pho with such accuracy you'd know we'd done this before. In Fresno, the bullets tire of themselves and begin to pray 5 times a day. In Fresno, we hope for less of the police state and more of a state of grace. In my California, you can watch the sun go down like in your California. on the ledge of the pregnant 22nd century, the one with a bounty of peaches and grapes, red onions and the good salsa, wine and japchae. Here in my California, paperbacks are free. Farmers markets are 24 hours a day and always packed. The trees and water have no nails in them. The priests eat well. The homeless eat well. Here in my California, everywhere is Chinatown. Everywhere is K-Town. Everywhere is Armenia Town. Everywhere a little Italy. Less Confederacy. No internment in the valley. Better history texts for the juniors. In my California, free sounds and free touch, free questions, free answers, free songs from parents and poets, those hopeful bodies of light. So, yeah, that's my California. And, my first term project, this is just coming to my mind now, is um, that I invited any Californian to write a poem about their town or their city or their California as they see it. If I'm not mistaken, you wrote, you wrote something?
I can't
Did you?
remember. I sent
Well,
something in, I think.
yeah, but they were so wonderful to read. And, the prompt also said that I encouraged them to write about what they love, but also write about what they would change or what they don't love about their communities. So those are really wonderful and exciting to read. People from all over the state sent them in. They're actually still online at the California Arts Council under Our California. But a lot of people writing out there.
Yeah. Cody, would you help us put that link in the YouTube and chats so people can look it up? I love reading. I check it once in a while to see if there are new pieces up.
Oh,
And
oh, sorry, Jed. I was just going to say it's actually no longer being updated. We kind of ended that, but all the poems that we received are still up there. But we received some from very accomplished, seasoned poets. Uh, my 83-year-old uncle from Ojai wrote a poem. He's a citrus farmer, and we had grade school kids. So, to your point that you made earlier, the laureateships offer that kind of expansive opportunity for us, I think.
an invitation for the community members to participate.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
love I love the food references because I feel that is a bonding universal kind of access that people can, yeah, peaches and olives and,
Hmm.
you know, chopped J and Chinese
Yeah.
food.
Yeah. I mean, um, we love Chinatown in LA. Anywhere we go, one of the main draws is food. But you mentioned Chinese food. You're Chinese American, right? And I understand, I believe that you're writing these wonderful poems about mahjong and its role in your culture and your life, right? Um,
Yeah.
would you mind talking about that? Whether you wanted to talk a little bit about food or um, what you're writing about these days with mahjong and things like that.
Yeah. I in my book Braided Spaces, there's actually a poem about Chinese food as a political act. You know, when we share food or break bread or eat together, then we can bond in ways that are nonverbal, but it's still very poetic. And so post pandemic, people are trying to find ways to be social, and there's a lot of sober, curious young people who are trying to make friends outside of school or other institutions. So mahjong has become a very popular thing. And in fact, there's a new book by someone who explains the different kinds of mahjong, like Filipino and Taiwanese and Shanghainese. So yeah, it's become a big hit with at least 4 or 5 different organizations in LA alone who put on mahjong games. The stereotype that we have of mahjong is that it's like bridge. You know, the older aunties and the grandmas and grandpas play mahjong at family events, but growing up, I grew up in Oakland, San Francisco Bay Area. Mahjong was a way for the extended family to get together and in Spanish, we say chisme. You can have the gossip, share what's what, and whose kid is misbehaving or winning awards. And you see that scene in Joy Luck Club. You know, oh, your daughter, she won the piano competition. Oh no, your daughter is so good at chess. You know, so there's, you know, a bit of one-upmanship where you are extra humble, right? You want your daughters to be winning all the awards, but you're like, oh, that's nothing compared to your Waverly. So it's a thing that started off as a bonding in Chinatowns, speaking of Chinatowns, in the tongs, the associations where people band together to provide small business loans to each other when Chinese Americans were out of, you know, banned and restricted from banking and such. And so there's all these scenes from movies, and now it's just like this people play out in the plaza. And it's
Yeah.
so delightful to see young people be interested, even if they don't speak the language.
Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, I could listen to you talk about this for a long time because um, games, cultures, families, rituals are cross-cultural. I was in Beijing 2 summers ago. My daughter and I went and spent about a month and a half in Beijing and a little bit south. And one of my favorite things was seeing the gatherings of people playing mahjong outdoors. And of course, people would kind of lean over and look at the game as they were playing. Um, how, you mentioned Joy Luck Club and the popularity of mahjong. And I think, of course, Tan's novel really propelled the culture into the mainstream a bit. And then, of course, the great film is Wayne Wang's direction. But and then Crazy Rich Asians recently, and with Koreans, I mean, I grew up having people ask me, what's Korea or where's that? Or, but now to have people from all cultures ask me if I've seen, Squid Game or Beef or if I like this, Blackpink, it's different. Do you find that it's a different time now with regard to um, Asian American culture and media?
I think that with social media offering more channels and the opportunity to go viral, like K-pop Demon Hunters, that song Golden cannot get out of my head. And it's just everywhere. And and then same ways, like West Hollywood has its own culture where the Pink Pony Club is an anthem everywhere. So I think in the 80s, we might have had this big surge of interest in anime. And now, because of social media, then we can have collectives and groups get together over fandom, right? So they can be fans over a K-pop band, or they can create little subcultures of like, how much of a big fan can you be?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's more visible, and I think people are starting to see the heterogeneity that we're not all Chinese, we're not all Korean, that there's
Yeah.
Japanese anime and K-pop songs, and then there's different versions of mahjong. People are noticing, okay, are we playing, Taiwanese style, Hong Kong style, or Filipino style.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great point. And the increased visibility is no doubt positive. Um, and not to dampen it, because it's very exciting for me and for so many, Alyssa Liu winning gold at the Olympics. It's so exciting. But the skeptic in me, or the historian, the amateur historian, I remember Margaret Cho's show All American Girl in 1983, a very short-lived sitcom on ABC, which people were rightfully excited about. That went for maybe a season or two, and I believe it was a couple of decades before Fresh Off the Boat came along. And so, I remember when Black Panther was um, winning all the acclaim and being so popular in the theaters. And I loved that film. Um, People said, "Well, it's going to change things." But it's just a slow change. And I'm just thinking out loud here, Jen. I hope this is okay. But what I'm hoping we can do, and I don't know how this happens. I'm sure reading helps and critical thinking, but what I'm hoping we can do, along with all of the amazing, exciting media things, and I mean that. I'm not trying to qualify that. It's very exciting, but that we can also start to see difference as a non-difference. In other words, one of the questions you mentioned was, we were exchanging some emails, was, what's it like to be the first Asian American California State Poet Laureate? I could ask you a similar question. Um, I'm hoping we can start to see what people see as difference as very much a normal part of the fabric that won't cause delays in their arrivals and in the visibility. In other words, I say to myself, I probably shouldn't have been the first. There could have been one before me. And hopefully there will be others after me. I wonder when people say, um, is the United States ready for a woman president? Well, there are 70, 80, 90 countries, maybe more, that have had female head of state. I hear people say, is the US, let's take Pete Buttigieg or someone like that. Is the US ready for a gay president or vice president, or an Asian American Supreme Court justice, which we've never had? I guess what I'm saying is I hope that rise in popularity can translate to um, other areas of society beyond media. In other words, yes, the entertainment, but there's also politics, education, the legal system, and things like that. Um, but
We
Mary,
have our we have our first U.S. poet laureate who is Asian American, Arthur C.
yeah,
I was
very
like,
exciting.
I was like, it took that long, really?
That's kind of my point, you
Yeah.
know. Um, that's exactly my point. And the ones that preceded him were great. This is not a knock on the preceding ones. But I just wonder if there's a subconscious pecking order or waiting line in people's minds. Like, why not earlier? Why not first? And there could be reasons for that. But Arthur's appointment, very exciting. Um, Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I'm going to bring up something that answers your question a little bit. I started off as a musician, and there was such a bias against women being in the orchestras and the symphonies that they had to put up screens, make it anonymous. But there were certain people who were in the positions of power, the conductors who were selecting the musicians, and they could hear the footsteps of the shoes. So they could tell a man's shoe versus a woman's shoe. So it got so bad that the anonymity of the shoes, so that the shoes would not be a telltale sign of them being a man or a woman. And I think these prejudices, I'm just going to call it that way, or preconceived preferences, are just what people are is offering people a chance to get familiar so that we are no longer such foreigners, right? And that fundamentally the history of the US was exclusionary towards Asians, and women didn't get the right to have their own checking account until the 70s. So that all these financial and political leadership choices are historical, and media can help shift, and I am hopeful for that.
Absolutely. And it does help shift it, and I think one of the ways it does it that translates into those other areas is, of course, through empathy, but also just seeing what people can be capable of, you know. For example, being heroic, you know, or sad and things like that.
Yeah.
But it's a great example you mentioned with the music. You started as with music and also voice. Am I right? You did some work with both?
Yeah, so my first instrument is piano, then I learned violin, and then in college I say I'm a accidental choir girl because I was trying to take some music major classes and they required us to sing, and I can sight read piano no problem, but I didn't know, I was never trained on how to sight sing. And so choir, the bonding of a chorus, it creates some kind of beauty that is not, you could just like mahjong, doing a game, doing a mission, doing a project together allows people to get over your visual or, whatever differences that you have. And in fact, I had one singing teacher say, diversity, it's like you have a big box of Crayola crayons with all the colors. Why would you not want the bigger box of crayons instead of one type of voice where you're limited to how many colors you can paint? Training has so much imagery, and that naturally is poetry, right? That song lyrics, poetry were so fundamentally tied from the beginning of, ancient civilization of Greek great poets and philosophers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very true. This is interesting, these sort of uh, similarities. My graduate work was actually in classical Greek rhetoricians. I studied Aristotle and Cicero and wrote quite a bit on Aristotle's book, The Art of Rhetoric. Um, but yeah, poetry and the music. My experience with music as a listener, as a younger person, wasn't as heady as choir or piano, but I'll still defend it. Um, but I loved listening to the radio, Jen. I loved it so much. I would sit there and listen on Sunday mornings. Casey Kasem counted down the America's Top 40, and I listened for 3 hours and wrote down every song, every Sunday, and what order they were in. And when I got into high school, one of the first times I really started thinking about lyrics and writing creatively was after listening to the first Run DMC album, the rap group Run DMC. Very dynamic, very rhythmic, and there was an urgency and a little bit of an underlying anger that I really resonated with at that time in my life. Um, 16, maybe 15 years old. Any psychologist worth her salt could probably now point out quite obviously that it had to do with my adoption. You know, I was born on the other side of the earth. And I'm now raised in this white family in the US. Questions about identity, questions about my first family, a lot of anger and confusion and doubt. So rap music and punk at that time was just the thing. It was perfect. Like the great
I
things
think that
are, right? Yeah.
I think that's I think that's a great prelude to us sharing each a poem. I have one that is very much observing a space through the audio experience. And I would love to hear a poem from you about your belonging or adoption perspective. So, my poem is called A Waverly at an Asian Casino in Southern California. And I made it after Angelina Weld Grimke's A Mona Lisa. And Waverly is a reference to Joy Luck Club. Is that I am one of the many Waverlys, like one of the many Jane Smiths. I should like to weave through the round lacquer tables to observe their dreams for prosperity. I should like to blend in among the box-dyed magenta or blonde hair of the savvy aging aunties with their slyly scrutinizing gaze. I should like to exist without judgment among distant genetic family. Their poker chips clink percussive beats, their scraping cards sigh. I should like to harmonize the collective atonal hum, hopeful as my own, as my own, as my own orchestra of belonging. Would I be more than a motherless daughter yearning? Or, better, a customer with no appetite for bets except for cheap late night pho in their 1950s themed diner? Would my lack of demure posture be the only sign they need to know I am not an immigrant nor have a husband? Wandering, like I'm the American lost and found, fragments of Asian ancestors found and lost in their ocean of Vegas bright lights and lingering cologne in humble city of commerce. An appoggiatura without a resolution, leaning on expectation without a cadence.
All right.
So my lawyer
Okay.
friend, my lawyer friend did not know what an appoggiatura is. And so if you don't know what an appoggiatura is, it's a tension note that needs to resolve into the key signature. It's a note that is not in the scale or in the key. And when I say leaning on expectation without a cadence is the end of a phrase. So like, Amen. You know, most
Mm,
religious songs have that kind of ending, or, so, do,
mm,
right? And so you land back on do, but do is home base in music. And when I feel disconnected from my motherland, I don't get to go home to do.
mm,
I'm in a
mm,
tension note that doesn't get to come back to the homeland.
mm. Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. I'm in a tension note. That's beautiful. And the line also in that poem is wonderful poem. An orchestra of my own belonging, my own orchestra of belonging.
Hmm.
A question comes to mind. When do you feel most at home as either Chinese American, American, Southern Californian, as a poet? When do you feel most in that orchestra of your own belonging, if you will?
I think it is amongst other Asian Americans if they are also aware of making the effort to be welcoming. I think it is all in the vibe. Are people being welcoming, right? Do they make an effort to talk to a stranger? And this is what I feel about poetry readings. Sometimes people might be in a clique, and then there are certain people like you and me, when we see somebody wandering around alone, we'll be like, come on, come share in this conversation with us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think belonging is a challenge for all of us who have different identities where we were made outsiders in our early formative years. Another place for belonging is the WeHo Arts, the WeHo Pride Arts Festival that Mike puts together because Mike and the team bring in so many different kinds of artists. So we're all a little weird. We're all a little bit different, and being all different, we kind of belong.
Yeah.
That Crayola
Yeah.
box of crayons with all the different colors.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I love being around poets, musicians, artists, writers, because we are, I think, all a little odd in one way or another. That can be soothing, comforting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
What about you? Can you answer your own question? When do you feel like you're more belonging?
um, for me, in terms of people and makeup, um, definitely a good number Asian Americans. But I think my experience really, it also really requires a range of diversity. You know, living in Fresno now for so many years, I start to feel out of place if I don't feel or experience some Latino or Mexican, Latin American culture or language or food. Um, some blackness, some native, some strangeness, some as much of a diversity as possible, I feel comfortable with. Um, I don't, and we've all been around really stuffy, formal occasions, but I'm pretty informal. So, down to earth situations, friendliness, and that kind of gets to what you were talking about, welcoming. Just a hello, it doesn't have to be for me, someone coming up to me asking about my heritage and becoming best friends, but just a greeting, just a smile can go so far. Um, you asked me to read something about culture, which I could.
Or belonging, whatever floats to
Well,
the top.
you're inspiring me. I wanted to read one maybe about music and sound, but I will read this. This is sort of a lyric poem. It's not too long. Um, it's called Adoption, and
I want to hear both.
it touches on it touches on some of the things we were talking about earlier. Okay, so this is titled Adoption. Adoption is a wildfire, glass lake, steep mountain. Adopt, adapt, adaptation, adoption, adopted, adoptee, adulation, adoration, adult, adept, adopter, adoptive, adopt a pet, adopt a textbook, readopt, Hollywood, adoption, distortion, Iron Man, Spider-Man, Superman, Annie, The Jerk, Punky Brewster, and Margot, Edith, and Agnes from Despicable Me, Meme, Memory, Magically, Mystery, We Who Miss, We Who Magic, We Who Breathe so deep like this. To remember is to become wholly functional again, to join the group again, to rebody, to memoir, to recreate, reverse, recollect, remind, resist, rehabilitate, recover, reestablish, reform. To write is to form again, establish again, to exist again. Adoption is to mind again, verse again, to build, store, create, and live again. Um, I don't know if this happens to you or if anybody's listening and when you read a poem of your own or someone else's poem, you feel it and think about different things each time. I Something just came to me about living again and writing. It feels so much like that. Uh, Recreation and living again, being renewed. And I think we so often, at least I so often need renewal. It could
Hmm.
be on a daily basis. I just need to take a walk, or it's been a challenging month or a difficult year. But poetry, I'm really preaching now, but I felt that at the end, you know. I think it's one of the things poetry does for us is it renews us.
I heard the words miss and magic and remember. The mama mama sounds are very maternal.
Oh.
And, you know, I'm the oldest of five kids and an Anne of Green Gables of sort who's babysat hundreds of babies. And so the baby sounds, they go mama mama ba 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 ba. So it's like trying to figure out their lip movement. And I think the ma is so primal. Um, and that, you know, adoption has sounds that are not very in the mama sound, right?
Uh-huh.
They do use the da 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 sound, but yeah, P's are definitely hard to say. So just the word adoption is not a very warm word. And then
Yeah.
remember and magic, those have very warm feelings sound
Yeah.
wise.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I am very much interested in sounds and suffixes like shun, however it's spelled. Um, and in that poem, if you were to look at the structure of it, it's in a prose form, but it's really split into two. So the first part of the poem is all the adoption stuff, and it's almost the same amount of lines as the remember, resist, recover. So I was playing with that idea of the prefix re, meaning again. But I've never thought about that, Jen. That's really fascinating. The maternal sounds of remember and things like that. That might be an example of something coming through a poem that's larger than us or that we're not in control of. You know what I mean? It's like, do you ever find that? Like, why is the word troubadour? Like, do you find is it, Hollywood references or cultural things or even a word that you love just make their way into our poems, you know?
Right. Remember is such a powerful word because it's charting your history, it's charting collective memory as well. So you're asking yourself to remember, you're asking the collective to remember
Yeah.
through the poem. And you're so right that every time I read my own poem, I find something else that I was like, oh, today I noticed this thing.
Yeah. 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 To remember, if you think about member as a person, like a part of something, is to bring somebody back in, or like something like
The
an
arm.
arm. I was thinking about that's where that line came to me is to remember is to become wholly functional again. So we reclaim, and as an adoptee or as and adoptees aren't the only ones that need to remember or reclaim or become whole or more whole again. But poetry is a great way for me to do that. Even if I'm inventing something, I'm becoming more whole, I think through the writing and the remembering or the imagining.
Yeah, the renewal. I love that. That every day I'm not a morning person. I am not bright-eyed and cheery, bushy-tailed. And I've had roommates that were like, "Hello, good morning." I'm like, "Shh." And so it's like I motor up in the morning with meditation and poetry. And so when you say you need the daily renewal, I'm like, yes, please.
Yeah. I mean, and however, whatever cycle we're on, see, now I'm very much a morning person. So I'm often up at like 5 a.m. and but then I shut down earlier than most probably, you know. But I think we all need it. I think this is why people like to go for a walk or they like to go to the beach or the mountains or somewhere where there's open space. I think nature is rejuvenating and um, so yeah, in music, you have these other poems. I kind of almost want to request poems from you, but um, uh,
Well, well, speaking of belonging and nature, I'm going to take your prompt about nature and muse on the concept of bamboo. Bamboo is a very well loved resource for environmentalists, but bamboo, I went to visit as a child to Hong Kong, where my parents are from, and they built scaffolding made of bamboo, and apparently the bamboo scaffolding was stronger than the American metal scaffolds. And Hong Kong is known as a city of candlesticks, that the high rises are so tall and so skinny that they look like candles. But bamboo can also be turned as an insult, and juxing is what my parents told me as a reference to American born Chinese or other children who are born outside of China, the diaspora children. So I muse on bamboo here. Bamboo children of the Chinese diaspora are strong, like precious jade. They say, we children of immigrants are hollow, without culture. We don't belong to the mother country, nor are we really American. But we are the most adaptable, like bamboo, to any environment, a renewable resource, be it the backyard privacy fence for the Architectural Digest house, or the eco-flooring tax credit for affordable housing units. We transcend caste systems, parties delineated by race or class. We set roots wherever we're grown. We can work with the rich or cook with the poor. We walk through many doors, or rather, we make space in seemingly impermeable rooms. We grow with intensity, like jade stones deepen in color, becoming more precious as we are warmed, rubbing skin, made into something not found in raw nature, even stronger than bamboo.
mm, love it. Love it. It's interesting. Children of immigrants not being hollow and so strong and so likely to grow with intensity. Um, what was the what was there an initial impulse to write this poem? Was there something that originally sparked this?
I was thinking about diaspora. I was thinking about Chinese words that are insults. And part of my defiance, I have a natural defiance and rebellion about stereotypes or labels that don't feel complimentary. So this is a reclamation. Speaking of this is reclamation of a renewable resource that is actually uh, we are not just the cheap flooring that gives you the tax credit.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. Amen. I'm cheering over here because I too really abhor the labels and the sort of narrow ways that people are seen. I don't know. I think I saw something pop up and it might have been mentioned, but I just wanted to say really quickly that if anyone has a question, I don't know if they will. I think we're going to have time at the end for questions, hopefully, from
Yes, we
anybody who
will.
might want to ask. Um, yeah, the defiance, the strength, uh, that could be cultural, you know. Um, And there's a line in here about, you know, what is American? Are we really this, really that? Um, yeah, do you have thoughts on that?
I mean, immigrants are not all the same, right? That some are very rich immigrants, like those in Crazy Rich Asians, but most of us are not. And I came from a more working class background, and then my younger siblings had a much more middle class upbringing because mom made more money. Uh, and that I have become, I've worked as a cater waiter to being someone's Pilates trainer. And so in the different service jobs, I've had to enter different kinds of homes and different kinds of environments that we have to walk through. So yeah, that's
Hmm. Hmm.
because of my lack of belonging.
Yeah, yeah. I've sometimes thought that it's one of this country's greatest failures is being able to um, capitalize or see this incredible diversity as the strength that it is. And of course, compared to Chinese civilization or Korean or some others, thousands of years old, the United States is a few hundred, and 400 some odd. Uh, 300 maybe, but really a long way to go. Very young country. It's unfortunate. I think we're still very much in a state of like infancy in terms of social development. Um, Tantrums, you know, division, things like that. In California, one of my favorite statistics, Jen, I've become this little amateur student of California history, but people might know this, but about one out of every four Californians was born outside of the United States. In California, there are about 39 million people, roughly, significantly more than the next most populous, which is Texas. But of our 39 million, about 7 million are Asian American. And so that's significant. At Hawaii, the whole state is 1.4 million. So in California, there are more Asian Americans than all the people in Hawaii four times over. So we aren't this side note, side dish, afterthought. Maybe this is obvious. I don't know if it is or not, but uh, this is kind of inspiring for me, you know, to be with you.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
I'll read one. It's a newer poem, and I don't know. I hope it'll tie in here a bit. But I thought I would read this when I heard you say you were talking about class. And I think even that last poem or one of
Mhm.
your poems refers to, yeah, we transcend caste systems, um, which is an important part of all of this, right? This intersectional, the ways, caste, class, race. You mentioned when we chatted before your queerness, and maybe we could talk about that if you want after this. But I was starting to read, I thought I would read this poem because it talks a little bit about um, the economics of it all. Um, did you ever see the movie, the great Korean film 2019 called Parasite?
No, I did not.
Oh, sorry to
But
call you out randomly.
give us a little summaries for
Well,
those who want to understand what you want to share.
yeah, so for it's a great film. It's one of my favorites. It's the first film not in English to win Best Film from the Oscars. The great Bong Joon-ho directed it. But basically, this poem I wrote was inspired by that. So it has some references, but I started thinking about just the nature of parasitism or a parasite and how we see the poor and how we think of that word. So this is titled
Hmm.
One one who eats at the table of another after Parasite. We've all needed someone to live, to feed us, nurse us, to want us, to keep us from our fatal allergy. In one scene, we fake our name. In another, we angle for free Wi-Fi, open windows for free fumigation. In one scene, Dasong's self-portrait of madness or the basement dweller. The young boy knows he isn't crazy. Haven't we all needed someone to understand us and our wild idea? In the basement, a husband in hiding. In the stairwell, a blunt rock to the head. Parasitism is the most common survival strategy in the world. Of the 8 million species on Earth, almost half are parasitic. We invent and reinvent ourselves, a new name, day by day, line by line, to make believe, to make belief where there was none, to eat at the table of the host. Invention is a survival skill. You be the tutor, she'll be the maid. He'll be the rich man's driver, she'll be Jessica, only child, Illinois, Chicago. Haven't we all needed a song to become who we need to be? Corporate, parasite, hypocrite, socialite. Don't the wealthy feed off the poor, drain them of their energy, make them wait longer, search harder, fold more pizza boxes per hour? In one scene, I could be everyone and no one, in love with the violent end, the murderer stuck in the basement of his own making. Someone new will come by this house. Someone new will tend to the yard. You be the mythic architect. I'll be the Korean farmer surviving.
Wow. I love the concept that we are somehow so interconnected as parasites of each other, right? That
Yeah, I started to
I love
think,
that.
thank you. Yeah, and I think it's true. I think, um, I don't know if it's just an American um, proclivity or phenomenon, but really pathologizing the poor, that there's something wrong with them mentally. Why can't you just work harder? Why can't you just get a job? While most structures are designed for that kind of separation, I think. So, but yeah, and that was in the poem. I just got to thinking, well, shoot, I need a lot sometimes. I need, whether it's renewal or I need some help with this, or and I can't be the only one. So it just made me question myself why I have been critical, or why others, well, I don't like to tell others how to think, but I'll just say why I have been um uh why I have thought that way in the past. So I was sort of interrogating my own thinking, really.
They done studies about happiness, and I can't remember and I don't want to say it wrong, but there was, all these measurements of happiness and that Americans are sleep deprived and the least happy, and they found this ancient grandma, probably 90 something, maybe even 100 years old, in a small village living on less than $1 a day, was the most happy in terms of the happiness measurements that they were doing. And her differentiating factor was that she was surrounded by her village, her great grandchildren, all her family, that she was interconnected, had social satisfaction. And it didn't matter that she had, dirt floors or didn't have more than $1 a day, because she had all that love and connection. And I think poetry gives us that opportunity to connect,
Yeah.
and that hopefully our poetry can bring more community members together and give them some kind of satisfaction.
Yeah.
I tell people repeatedly, see the same faces that you're in class with so that you can become friends, that you find neighbors or classmates that you bond with that make you feel a little bit more connected, not as alone, as a human, as a poet, as a writer.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you for that Parasite poem. I'm like, wow.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I can't remember if it's available full text online or not, but it was published in a literary magazine called, I think it's called Verseville, but the Los Angeles poet Suzanne Lummis edited. I think it's in there. Anyway,
Well, you
yeah,
can,
the
will you send it to me and we
I
could,
will send it to you. Yeah.
yeah, we could share with our audience maybe
Well, yeah,
the
but
link or something like that.
yeah. You know, the idea of connection you mentioned in that country with happiness, it reminds me of in Bhutan, they
Mm.
used to measure gross national happiness. And I think of happiness in that part of the world, in that way of thinking, as what I consider to be a Western hemisphere or American concept of joy. So, for example, you know, if we think of it here in the US, I'm thinking of happiness. People say, "Oh, I found $20 in my jacket," so we get happy. Or, if you catch four green lights in a row, or if there's no traffic, that's reason for happiness, of course. But does that mean because the lights will turn red, I'll lose $20? Then my happiness is taken away. And what I say when I've talked to students about this is that joy is what I'm after because joy is more consistent, constant. It has not, for me, it has nothing to do with traffic or the $20, which might understand be a privilege to say I can do without $20. But my point is joy isn't dependent on external things like traffic. So that woman you said who was very poor and whatnot was so deeply joyful and so deeply happy. I love that. And I agree 100%. Poetry, the arts, a good song. Oh, there's nothing like a
Yeah.
great song, you know? Um, and um one thing I did a couple of years ago, I was asked to do a talk. There's a great organization based in DC called the Coalition to End Social Isolation and Loneliness because they know what you just mentioned about the importance of connection, family, community for our wellness and maybe even our longevity. So I'm, and I know the irony of doing it on a computer right now. We're using technology and it's one of the great benefits of it. But I always want to get out, be around people. Uh, just outdoors is very uh, healing. So
Well, we have about 15 minutes left, and we have some audience questions
yeah.
that have more to do with our poet laureate position.
Hmm.
So, speaking of connection, what was something unexpected that we learned as a poet laureate, and how has that shaped the way we approach our work now?
Hmm. Yeah. Do you want to take that one
Well,
or
I think
start that?
we I admire how much you travel, and I imagine that might be more challenging because you might not see the same people over and over again. So I'll say that first off, I really enjoy the library environment, and I feel very privileged and honored and thankful to get to teach classes there, and I get to create course material and they work and people appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
So I've taught titles like Voice for LGBTQ History Month, and I'll do that again for this coming October. And people appreciated the diversity of poems I curated way to more recent poets like Andrea Gibson. And I like the diversity of poetry, and so I'm delighted that students who may not have been exposed to such a variety of demographics are willing to enjoy that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, paint with all the crayons in the box, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. For me, what's been unexpected, in some ways, this laureateship has deepened what I already thought. And one of those is that people of all ages and walks of life are reading or writing or will listen to and enjoy poetry. And that's been affirmed. In my first term, in the 2 years, I had over 200 events. So I was on the road a lot. And, of course, we know there's great poetry in West Hollywood, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Fresno, but I've been to small towns that I had not heard of, and I've lived here for over 50 years since I was adopted. Never heard of, 1,000 people in the town, and 30 of them will come to the poetry reading. All ages. Um, that's been affirmed. You know, Also just the range of people who are writing or who want to write it. And really what it amounts to is want to say something with language. Not with an instrument, those would be musicians, not with painting or dance, but they want to say it with words and language. One example uh, is state prisons. And as I
Mm,
like to say, they are Californians too. But probably my favorite, one of the best Q&As I've ever done, and I've been writing you know, 25, 30 years, one of the best Q&As I've ever done was in a state prison. Schools of all types, libraries, I love the libraries, and the bookstores, schools of all kinds, very affluent private schools. I spoke at Harvard Westlake recently and places like that, and great public schools. But what I'm getting to is one of the most unexpected things that I, because I knew it would be expansive. This is a big state. I knew there were two things, and I'll try to wrap this up to this question. But there were two things I thought to myself before I accepted it, I had to be okay with. One is that I knew it would be more public, and I'm a very private person.
mm,
And the other thing is, I knew it would be much more social, and I'm very much an introvert. So that's been positive, that I've been able to embrace those parts of the laureateship. But the biggest unexpected thing, Jen, is the number of places where I never would have thought they'd want to have poetry, and they've had poetry. I mean, I've thought to myself, wow, for example, the United States Department of Energy had a conference, and there were all these scientists working with supercomputing and climatology and all this stuff. And then there was me. So things like that, where it's not literary, not arts related, that's been wonderful in a surprising way for this laureateship. Yeah.
fantastic. I love it when science and arts are much more in the same room. And as you had studied ancient Greek things, that there was not a divide between science and the arts.
Yeah.
Previously, I think that is some kind of industrialization
Yeah,
side effect. Second,
absolutely.
a second question to consider. Knowing what we have achieved in our poet laureate terms, is there still something we would love to accomplish in our role if time and resources were not a factor? You can go first since you have a much bigger job than
Could you
me.
repeat that, Jen? I'm sorry. What was the question?
Yeah. Knowing what we have already achieved as poet laureate, is there something we would love to accomplish in this role if time and resources were not a factor?
Whew, boy,
Like a dream project.
yeah, that's an interesting, it's a good question. Um, that's a good question, and with all due respect to it, I'll just add that I don't think of my work or anything that I've done necessarily in terms of achievements or accomplishments, but I do understand what the question is asking. When I think of time and resources, I think of a third element to those two, and that's energy. Time, energy, time, resources, and energy. Um, because I do think time, we'll make time for what we want to, you know. Um, but to the question, gosh, I think any and all ways we can bring people together in simple, low stakes, enjoyable ways around poetry. And I think so many laureates are doing that throughout the state. So many city and county laureates are doing this throughout California. One example that I experienced recently was in Carson City, Nevada, just about a month ago. There were 9 Western States laureates. It was really wonderful. I'd never been to or certainly read at an event like that. There were, laureates from Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, etc. I think if time and resources and energy were just abundant, I would love to have um, movie stars, rock stars, athletes, poets, high school kids do something together. I would love to see more people in mainstream media talk about poetry. And the Academy of American Poets does an event like this. Chloe Zhao, the great film director, was just part of their event where they do this. A lot of free giveaways. I mean, if money's not an issue, free books of poetry for everyone if we're really dreaming. But and then maybe a subtext of that question is how to make those things happen. I understand. So, a lot of opportunities for us. What about you, Jen?
Yeah. One, one thing we did during pandemic, because I had fewer social obligations because the world was shut down, was through the Pride Poets project, I took my dog out and we were writing sidewalk chalk poetry on the sidewalks. And it's a lot of squatting, like you say, energy. And then sometimes, the sidewalks get washed. So you would have to reprint, the line of poetry. But I heard so many neighbors enjoy bumping into that unexpected line of poetry while they're waiting for the crosswalk. And West Hollywood, for those of you who are not in West Hollywood, is a very walkable city. We have one main boulevard people walk to get their groceries, or we are a very dog friendly city, so there's a lot of regulars who are walking because of their pets. So, yeah, just to have surprise lines of poetry on the sidewalk chalk regularly. I heard from other laureate fellows from the Academy of American Poets, some of them have access to their city building facilities, resource people where when there's new concrete being poured on the sidewalks from new construction, they can stamp a line of poetry on the sidewalk with that. I was like, how cool is that? I never thought of something
Hmm.
so permanent.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's something about the sidewalk where I'm like, it's a slab of concrete anyway, might as well make it art.
Yeah. I love that. And that's a great low stakes way to let everybody do it. I love that. Um, yeah, Santa Cruz currently has a very fun poetry in the parks scavenger hunt where poems are sort of really nicely put together. It's not quite sidewalk chalk, but the great poetry walk in Berkeley, Kerouac Alley in San Francisco, where Chinatown and North Beach run into each other in that alley. Yeah, I think any way to get poetry in people's hands is probably a good thing.
Yeah, I'm dreaming that poetry could be as celebrated as visual art murals, that where there are alleyways, like you said, alleys, or, storage doors that are normally just gray doors or dumpsters, even. Like they paint utility boxes with
Yeah,
visual art. I'm like, we poets need to take advantage of that visual art and paint poetry on the utility boxes.
absolutely.
One more question. We have a few minutes left. Um, and to mention, there is a poetry walk in the median along Santa Monica Boulevard where Mike has stewarded some poem placards in the grassy area between the two directions of traffic. It's
Mhm.
closer to Doheny. So, yes, we have a poetry walk. I
Mm,
would love to see that expanded.
mm,
Um, so there's a question from the Q&A. How are we and our work influenced by poet laureates of all levels before we became poet laureate? Ooh, a
mm.
remembering question.
Oh, good question. Interesting
I will
question.
I will answer that first because I like to read um, the poet laureates, like the US poet laureates, to be like, okay, what did they write about? What did Joy Harjo write about? What did Ada Limon write about? Um, yeah, I think finding a way that a poem can speak to different kinds of people. So appreciating that. That would be how
Mm,
I'm influenced. How can I create a poem that even people outside my diaspora perspective or my queer perspective can have access to?
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's interesting. I've not been asked that question, but I love it. I think we have to be, well, we don't have to be anything, but I think if we're wanting to write somewhat seriously and engage in the art, we have to read the practitioners of it. I can't think of a musician who doesn't listen to good music. I'm uh, I was very much and still am deeply inspired and influenced by Juan Felipe Herrera, who lives in Fresno. I just read with him actually a few nights ago. He was the poet laureate recently. One of I think it's Ada's, maybe her second book, maybe her third book, is one of my favorites that I've read, I don't know how many times, called Bright Dead Things. Um, there are many, of course, Joy, Tracy. Uh, I was also influenced by Phil Levine, who's also from Fresno, former US Poet Laureate Philip Levine. And many others at the national level. And I think one thing that they help me do is, in terms of my own writing or thinking, is kind of like um, a magnification, but also an expansion of an idea or a line or a word. So it could be the lyric, it could be the poem's velocity, the poem's scope or microscope on an experience or an idea or a theme. And US Poets Laureate, I'm sure, over the course of their terms, have that come more into focus. I mean, Juan Felipe and Ada were both asked to write, and they wrote a poem that was put into space. So, that kind of thing, but also how to still make it a poem that's visceral and local, if you will. Um, and then to kind of combine these last two questions, one of the great unexpected joys has been, and I mean this, and I'm going to think about this more as my term starts to wind down in the next 2 years, is how deeply meaningful it has been to learn from, to meet, to be in the communities, even for a short time, of people like Jen and laureates throughout this state who are doing such incredible work. I loved what Mike, or maybe it was Cody, said at the intro when they mentioned Jen. I think they said something like city treasure, you know, and he's not being hyperbolic. That's a wonderful thing that I've taken from the laureates throughout the state as well.
I also want to expand this question to say there are great poets who were not officially knighted as poet laureate, and I feel like we walk in their paths of
Absolutely.
their trails. So people like James Baldwin and Maya Angelou, I reread and read all the time. So they might not be
Hmm.
named a laureate, but I think great poets are great people to learn from regardless. So we're wrapping out. We are at 8:01. And if you would like to leave any last remarks before we wrap up?
No, just thank you, Jen. Thank you for having me. This has been wonderful. Thank you, folks, for listening in, and I hope everybody's um, doing well, and you'll continue to be well, especially in this time. So thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for our audience who have joined us live with your questions. And then thank you for those who are listening to this as a replay. And I hope you find poems that comfort you, poems that help you feel like you belong, and enjoy finding some curiosity through poems and bringing friends to poetry. And shall we wrap up with Cody signing us out, or Mike?
Happy to do that. Thank you so much, Jen. Thank you, Lee. This has been a wonderful night of poetry. Everyone, I hope the rest of your week goes swimmingly and that you remember all that was said tonight because I think it's been wonderful. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you.
All right, we're good to go.